Good morning, everybody. It is Breakfast with the Buzz. This Saturday morning, we are getting you all ready to enter week 3 of the NFL. Although we did have a game Thursday night, a great game Thursday night. But for the rest of everyone who is an
I don't know if you call it a
fan,
great game.
It was fins up. Come on.
For us, yes.
right?
I had people
However,
I had people texting me from like Chicago going, that game was brutal to watch. I'm like, I know because you're not a Dolphin fan. That's the only reason.
Hey, for James Robinson owners that got paid, they were pretty happy.
That's right. So, but we're going to get everybody else ready this morning. What we're doing is a special Saturday morning edition just to make sure that everybody has their lineups correct. We know who to start, who to sit, what some of the injuries are. And guys, let's just get started. Although, Brad, it looks like you've been kidnapped. Are you okay? Just blink twice.
I am okay.
Okay, all right.
So yes,
You're not.
Sometimes you have to go to some unique places. This morning, my son is actually working across town. It's his first day as a soccer ref. So I drove him, and I'm waiting for him instead of driving 45 minutes home and 45 minutes back to get him after. So this is where I am, but I'm here.
All right. It's the beauty of technology. The fact that you're able to do that is great. So why don't we make it worth your while and everybody's while and start talking about what's some of the news going on in the NFL? What should people be aware of for tomorrow?
Go ahead, 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. So some game time decisions that you want to be very careful of. Some major wide receivers. Devontae Adams is looking like a true Sunday night game time decision. So be prepared there. You could take the risk. I'd have Scantling or Lazard on your backup just in case you're going to take the chance that he's going to play. Same thing with Kenny Galladay, who was trending in the right direction, but now there's some question marks whether or not he's going to play. Some notable outs. I know you guys are going to laugh, but Jamison Crowder and Brashad Perriman are both out. You know something? These guys, both of them, when one is out and the other is in, are incredibly high volume plays. They're both out, so look for that. Crowder was getting 7-8 grabs a game when he's not injured. So that's very notable. Looks like Malcolm Brown.
They don't have mono, do they?
They have Gase.
Worse, which is it's the worst virus. There's no vaccine for Adam Gase. Malcolm Brown, for those of you that thought you were going to get Darrell Henderson alone in the backfield, which was a great play, by the way. Brown looks like he's back in, so beware for that split. Josh Jacobs.
I'm not sure about that. Brown, I think, is still a game time decision.
Well, I'm just saying he practiced though. He did practice. So if you practice,
several people practice, but they're still not playing.
Exactly.
So,
but if you haven't practiced, you're not in. If you
I think the bottom line is you can't rely on Brown or Henderson or Akers to be your RB1 or even your RB2. If you do, I mean, we're not recommending. Maybe Brad is because he picked up Henderson, but I don't know how many people are going to be recommending that you put either one of these guys in your starting lineup unless you're extremely desperate.
Exactly. All I was saying is when it looked like Brown wasn't playing and Henderson had the backfield to himself, that was a viable play. So the advice is that Brown might be playing, and that's now you need to consider whether you want Henderson in your lineup.
Right.
Jacobs, who is coming off a great game, is going into a very tough matchup, showed up on the injury report, and he lost his starting left tackle. Obviously, you're not going to sit Josh Jacobs, but something you want to monitor. He showed up on the injury list, and he also was not practicing. Julio Jones not practicing. Still might play, but that's a decision that you want to look at. What that really impacts, by the way, is Russell Gage, and we'll talk about that during the show. I love him this week. So just some of the major, there's a lot more too, but I don't want to take all the injuries. Let you guys chime in on some of the fun.
I mean, the injuries just go on and on and on. It doesn't seem to stop. You know, aside from injuries, I was trying to go through and count starting running backs from 2 weeks ago, from when the season started, to where we are now as far as running backs. And I got to like 6 or 7, and I'm not sure that was all. And that was just off the top of my head while I was sitting here prepping for the show. But it's just a long laundry list. And not only injuries, but players that have taken over, like James Robinson and other players. It goes on, and I mean, I don't know. I didn't quite hear. Did you mention Mostert and Tevin Coleman?
No, I was just going to say, talk about injuries. San Francisco had to go to Pop Warner Football to get people to play for them this week. They had so many injuries.
Yeah, that makes it interesting. I mean, you have McKinnon, and then you have Wilson. Wilson filled in a couple years ago in 2018. He had a couple really nice games when he filled in. But the biggest problem there is half of the team is injured.
Right.
I mean, so even if you have these fill-ins, you got to be careful because you know if they're going to be able to move the ball.
Right, and the thing that's scary about the impact on the defense, losing Nick Bosa and Solomon. Oh my God, I'm blank. Solomon Hill, is that right? Some key cogs of that defense means that offense is going to be on the field just a little bit less because that was such a stout front seven, and they've lost two of the biggest elements of that front seven. Still, I think McKinnon's a great play. You're right about Jeff Wilson, though. What they're saying is McKinnon might only carry the ball 10, 12 times. It's going to be used heavily out of the backfield because you got Nick Mullins throwing the ball, so you can see a lot of dump off passes. But I think Jeff, interesting play this week.
Are you hearing that static as well, or is that just me?
I think that's just you. But
okay,
yeah,
that's fine.
Just to continue here, we know for the people that have Cam Akers, we were just talking about Henderson and Brown. Akers is ruled out. Michael Thomas, of course, still ruled out. James White is still ruled out because of personal reasons. Jerry Jeudy going to be a game time decision. Not that you would want to start somebody like Jeudy at this point. Base with Jeff Driscoll throwing to him. Henry Ruggs, for those of you who were streaming him, he's also been ruled out. Christian Kirk, he's not going to play against the Lions. A.J. Brown, still ruled out.
Rager.
Right. Absolutely. So, guys, Philip Lindsay did return to practice. That does impact the Gordon owners, but it's something to keep in mind. And for looking into the future, Deebo Samuel, a guy we really haven't spoken about, he's probably available on a lot of waiver wires. He's expected to start practicing next week. And given the current state of the 49ers, it might be somebody you want to just keep an eye on.
So, Commish, what would be interesting? I know we're going to talk about stardom, sit-ems, whatever, but I think it's a perfect time to play into the fact those injuries are creating incredible opportunities for other players. So I want to touch on that a little bit. So Julio Jones' opportunity is going to create people are saying, well, Russell Gage was doing phenomenal anyway. He's getting 9 grabs a game. With Julio not being there, they're going to be able to hone in a little more. No, they're going to hone in on Calvin Ridley, who probably looks right now like the best receiver in the NFL. I think Gage can have a monster game. With Nick Mullins in Denver, and Jerry Jeudy looks like Jerry Judy's fine, right? He's going to play. I love Noah Fant this week because usually quarterbacks lean on their tight ends when they're first coming into games. He looks like a very good play with Cortland Sutton out for the year there. Some of the other injuries that we were just talking about. Oh, with A.J. Brown out, I love Corey Davis this week. Yeah. He's been the favorite there. He's scoring every week. Another great opportunity for him to come in.
I will tell you as a Julio owner, knowing that it's a game time decision, even if he does play, and he's going to be, Will Fuller's going to be on Julio with a bum hamstring. I've got Corey Davis on my bench. And I think at this point, I'm just going to stick Corey Davis in the lineup and bench Julio for the week. Number one, I don't want to take a chance. Number two, if he's not fully recovered, he's not going to be as effective. And number three, if he's going to have Will Fuller on him, I don't want to be the guy who's going to be shut down.
Right.
So it is something to think about. I agree with you on Corey Davis.
Mm-hmm. He's been putting up touchdowns every week.
Go
ahead.
I want to say you got to be a little careful sometimes when you get these opportunities for receivers. Now, Gage is different. I mean, he's already been doing well. Julio Jones, as you were talking about, is not going to be. So those are opportunities that have already been there. But when you have opportunities like you were talking about in Denver or some of these other places, and like in San Francisco,
Cyclop, if you could move your car maybe like into another spot,
or just spin the crank to get the power going. because
is it off?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're getting like every fifth word.
it's breaking up, and
Okay.
or maybe hit your local Radio Shack, see what you could find. So let's do that, and I think that's great. I don't know, Keith, if you had additional people you wanted to talk about with opportunities, but I did want to get to our Stardom Situm. We lost Brad, but that's fine. So wanted to get to our Stardom Situm, but we're also taking questions from all of you. So give us a call at 772-800-BUZZ. We'll get you on the air, answer your questions, or you can make a comment in Facebook Live or YouTube Live. We actually have 2 questions already so far. First question is Corey Davis or T.Y. Hilton, half-point PPR. Given what, Keith, what you had just said about Corey Davis, I'm going with Corey Davis. I'm so high on Corey Davis, I'm benching Julio Jones. T.Y. has not been as impressive. I really thought that with the addition of Phillip Rivers, T.Y. is going to be rejuvenated like he was under Andrew Luck. But that hasn't happened yet. So to answer your question, I would go with Corey Davis. Now, Alligator Feed also asked about Higbee or Waller PPR. That's a great dilemma. If you have both of those guys, you're in good shape. Personally, PPR, I'm going with Waller if it's PPR. And I'm a Higbee guy. In fact, I named my team after Higbee. But with the amount of catches, I mean, Waller is their offense, and Josh Jacobs, great running back, but if the ball leaves his hand, especially without Ruggs, I have to go. You have to keep going with Waller. You have to go with the hot guy, especially in PPR.
Can you guys hear me now?
I hear you.
Yeah, much better. All right, is that better? All right, good. Okay. You're going Waller over Higbee after Higbee had 3 touchdowns last week?
Higbee is getting touchdowns. I don't know if those opportunities will continue. I'm going to continue to start Higbee, but we're talking about Waller. If we were talking probably about any other tight end, my feelings might change. And it's like I said, it's a great dilemma to have.
It is. The only thing to look for is that Buffalo has been terrible against the tight end. They're giving up a lot of touchdown and a lot of grabs, although Waller is clearly Derek Carr's favorite target right now. So again, like you said, good dilemma to have. But I'm going to go on the opposite of your Waller and go Higbee, just because I think they're going to eat up Buffalo over the middle.
So you got to remember, Waller was a little banged up this week. So he didn't practice a few days, but he did practice, and they're not really. It's almost like a New England injury. They're just kind of holding him out to rest him because he was so active the other day. It seems like. So I think he's going to be fine. And
they're both going to get 15 points. Let's just leave it at that. So go ahead and
okay then.
But I think you're going to be fine. With either one of those. Okay, so guys, do you want to go ahead, Brad? What were you going to say?
So 2020, and I was thinking about that name 2020. I know you did it because of your vision, but is really 2020 the right nickname to have this year?
Well, that's why I did it, because it's a shit show
year. I thought it was because your vision. All right,
well, it was both.
Oh, got you.
It was both. That's
so
why I thought it was so
just a mess of destruction.
Well, my vision is a shit show. This year is a shit show. So I just thought, who knew if we were even going to have football? It was
So we're gonna throw a question out to you, the commish. All right, because we're 2020 and I are in a league together, and we were trying to look for a streaming quarterback. Right, we're gonna go right into quarterbacks here. So the first one that we were gonna ask about is Matt Stafford or Trubisky this week.
Oh. To me, that's easy, and
okay.
You may laugh, but Stafford's. If you had a graph and you were keeping track of revenue, Stafford's heading in the wrong direction. Stafford is heading down, where Trubisky's actually heading up. I like Chicago's offense this week. I think that Trubisky's going to have one of his best weeks this coming week. I know that Galladay coming back. If he comes back, is going to help Stafford. But until then, and until you have a healthy Galladay, I don't know if you can trust Stafford. That's why I would definitely go with Trubisky at this point.
And that's actually who we put in. They both have great matchups. You got
Yeah.
at Arizona, and that's the only thing I don't like is going across the country to Arizona, as well as at Atlanta, which should be a very nice matchup as well in the Dome. Both great matchups.
All right.
Right.
Thanks for the input. And just so you know, I was fighting for Trubisky yesterday, and he was fighting for Stafford.
Most,
Then
and I
switched,
understand
and
that.
then I
And
said,
most,
you know something, we should go Trubisky, and then we went with it.
most pundits and most experts are going to tell you to go with Stafford.
Right.
And I don't know if that's really based on his past and what Stafford's been able to do, or is there something that we don't know? The only thing we know is what we've seen. And if you're going to look at the past, then doesn't even count. Trubisky's terrible, and Stafford is,
Right.
on the cusp of potentially being a Hall of Famer if Detroit were to ever win a Super Bowl. But that's not week 3. And if we're looking at week 3, then I think it's Trubisky.
Right. And you know something, if it wasn't Stafford and the Lions going across the country, playing outside on grass, it would be a no-brainer for me, and I would stay Stafford, even without Galladay. But either way,
before we get further into our stardom sit-em, I do want to remind people that we are going to continue with our Stump the Buzz contest. So we were stumped last week. Jonah had asked a question. I forgot what the question was, but he asked which ones had targets, which players had over 23 targets, and there were 4 of them, and I think we came up with 3 of them. If you think you have a trivia question that you can stump us on, give us a call, 772-800-BUZZ, 772-800-BUZZ, or you can always comment in Facebook Live or YouTube Live. We'll get it on the air. Guys, let's start off with Stardom Sit-em. I know we were looking at the dilemma with Stafford and Trubisky. Who's like, let's talk about a quarterback right now. Which quarterbacks are you thinking about starting this week, other than, of course, the normal quarterbacks? And by the way, can we say now that Aaron Rodgers is officially back in that spot where you have to start him every week?
This week's the telling week.
I'm going to say, let's see what happens this week, week 3, without Adams. Okay? With Adams, he's a different quarterback. Without Adams this week, and he goes back to Lazard and Scantling, and of course he has, his backfield.
Aaron Jones has been getting all the targets.
He's getting all the targets. But let's see what happens when they can't take that defense and focus on Adams, and what happens to Aaron Rodgers. I'm curious. I do agree Rodgers is like back in that top tier, or at least the second tier, but I'm very curious how this week goes.
I agree. It's not fair though without Adams, because that's a big deal. That's taking away a guy's favorite weapon. Let's see how Breeze has been doing without Thomas. Has not been very good. I don't think Breeze has lost quite as much as everyone has said, but without his favorite target, they're different quarterbacks. Every quarterback's going to be a little bit different when that's the case. So I'm kind of agreeing with you. This week is going to be telling as well, to see if he can consistently do it. But without Devontae Adams, I don't think it's a fair read. I really don't.
All right. So do you want to start this week?
I like Ryan Tannehill. Is that what you were going to say?
Yeah, I was going to.
Good. Well, I won, so I'm talking. No. No, I agree. I love Ryan Tannehill. I do. It's a great matchup against a pretty porous Minnesota secondary. My only concern is that Minnesota's offense, I've never seen Kirk Cousins in a slump like this. It is unwatchable football watching him. And it sucks if you're a Thielen owner. It sucks if you're a Dalvin Cook owner as well. But my concern is that Minnesota is so bad that they're going to be able to rely heavily on Derrick Henry. If that's not the case, then I like Ryan Tannehill. The guy is just accurate deep ball passing. He's got some nice targets in Jonnu Smith, Corey Davis, Adam Humphries. So I think Tannehill's a nice play this week.
Yeah. And sorry, go ahead, Seth.
No, I was just going to say Tannehill up to this point, and it's only been 2 games, but he has over 120 QB rating, 6-0 as far as TD interception rate, and he's one of the top 10 fantasy quarterbacks right now.
Yeah, I mean,
and then you're playing against a team like Minnesota. I agree. This is a no-brainer.
Yeah. You want to hear an interesting stat? Go ahead. I'm sorry, Cyclop.
He's got 2 or more touchdowns in 9 straight games.
That was the stat.
9 straight games.
Yeah.
I mean, that's actually amazing.
Amazing.
I was listening to some other radio all week we listen, we talk and everything. And they went through a whole list of Adam Gase descendants and what happened to them after Gase either leaves or they go to another team. Starting with Tannehill, and then he goes to another team, and look what happens to Bell, and look what happens to these players that are playing under Gase, or Gase leaves, and look what happens to Parker. All these things. Tannehill got out of this situation, goes to another team that may be better fit for his style of play, and he's really excelling. He was a top quarterback at the end of the last fantasy season, and he's continuing his good play. I mean, if there's a week to play him against this Minnesota defense, this is it.
Yeah. It's like, they say someone has the Midas touch, everything they touch turns to gold. What does Gase have? Is that like the anthrax touch or the concrete touch or something? What's the opposite of the Midas touch?
Crap. And that's what Gase is, which is why he belongs in New York. Okay,
in New York, right?
Any other quarterbacks?
So we already talked about him, but I'm going with Trubisky here. He's going to be a guy that most people are streaming. He, as you were saying, Commish, and we talked about for probably a half an hour yesterday, 2020. It just look at the matchup. It's on turf. It's in Atlanta. Atlanta's defense has given up 40 points a game. If there is not a week to start Trubisky, this has to be it. If you need a quarterback, if you have someone that's you picked earlier, like our situation, we'll give you our situation. We have Breeze on our team, and Breeze isn't putting up horrible numbers, but you're looking at the upside, and someone to stream for this week, it's Trubisky.
I agree.
You want to hear a sneaky play that nobody's going to, because there's other people out there, Goff's on everyone's waiver wire. I like Justin Herbert this week against Carolina. Carolina has an incredibly Swiss cheese defense. And I think what you're going to see is Herbert's going to do a lot of great dump off passes to Eckler as well as Kelly. I think Kelly is going to run all over them. By the way, that's one of my stardoms this week. But that defense is so bad. You know what? Herbert looked pretty darn good last week. And he's got some weapons there, and Williams and Allen and Hunter Henry. He's really featuring that. I see Herbert going for 250 and 2 scores this week. He's going to outplay a lot of other very high-end quarterbacks just because of that matchup.
Yeah, Carolina has been giving up 228 yards per game in the air. But they've also been playing where teams are trying to catch up. And I don't know if that offense is going to be what it was without CMC. And as a result, who knows if it's going to be necessary for the Chargers to be throwing. That's my only concern. I'm not saying that Herbert is going to have a bad game, but if we're talking about upside potential, I don't know if you're going to get that 300-yard game because he's not going to have to pass as much. Mm-hmm. But it's not a bad play. But if you're desperate, I agree. It's somebody to think about.
I'm a little not concerned about Herbert. He looked really good last week against a really good team. They weren't expecting him to play. That's another thing we can get into is lung puncturing from the team doctor.
Oh my God.
I was listening to some things this week that, this isn't the first time something like this has happened. But it's just, we're hearing about it. And I was actually listening to some stats, and Rivers came out and said, he's been injected about 80 times throughout his career. With these, and it's such a common thing. It's just so uncommon for something like this to happen. It happened to Jerome Bettis many years ago, where he warmed up and then, something happened and he couldn't play in the game. Now it happened to Tyrod Taylor. Fortunately, no one probably had Tyrod Taylor, so it didn't really affect fantasy all that much. But yeah, Herbert, steps in. He has a great game. Now Carolina, who, yes, is not a very good defense, has a little bit of time to game plan against a rookie quarterback. Okay, so I understand a lot of people are streaming Herbert this week, but I caution them that it's still a rookie quarterback, and you just got to be a little careful there. I think there may be better options.
All right, so guys, You heard what we talked about as far as quarterbacks. We're talking about Ryan Tannehill. We're talking about Trubisky, possibly Herbert as a flyer. I want to move on to running backs, and I want to start this off because of what happened last week. Tom Brady went to hand off the ball to Ronald Jones. He fumbled it, and then we saw Fournette. And Fournette went ahead. He ran for 103 yards and a couple scores, and that was mainly just in the second half. So where Ronald Jones only had 3.3 yards per carry against a terrible Carolina defense, which we talked about, Fournette had 8.6 and got 4 of the 5 targets that were thrown to him. So I think Ronald Jones is done in Tampa Bay. Fournette's going to take, if he isn't taking over this week, he's going to be taking over sooner rather than later. Denver has given up a 100-yard rusher in each of the last 2 games. In fact, it's 119 yards per game, which is what they're giving up. So I'm playing Fournette. If I have Fournette, I think this is his week.
I don't disagree with you. You know, I think, yeah. I mean, once that happens in the backfield, and they were just kind of waiting for this opportunity to happen, right? Like maybe they were trying to still appease Jones, and then all of a sudden, fumble, boom, you're out, and Fournette kind of takes over in the second half. One of his, 40, I think, of his yards were on that one run.
Yeah.
Very late in the game.
Right.
But it still shows that he can do it.
Fournette can do that, and Fournette has done that. Ronald Jones does not do that. He's not going to break 2 tackles and then run for 40 yards.
I guess the big question is, how long can he stay healthy? Right. And this year there's so many people getting hurt, and you're looking for, it seems like I can't imagine any team right now isn't just looking for that next guy up. And I'm talking about fantasy, not even.
Okay. So I understand. And we're not talking about drafting. We're talking about week 3. If we're talking about week 3 only here, I think Fournette's a good play. What other running backs are you guys looking at?
I like James Conner, and here's a guy that we were talking about sitting last week because he looked so bad in week 2, and it looked like Benny Snell just in that game. Benny Snell looked like such a better rusher. He was making better cuts, reading the holes better, getting through it. He was coming out of the backfield, and then what happens? Just like what happens in the NFL, they completely have an entirely different narrative. And not only is Conner looking like the James Conner of 2018, but he was even getting the passing down work as well. So he's going up against a Houston team that is not firing on all cylinders offensively. I think this is a very good James Conner game to go for 100 yards and a touch. And maybe,
Houston actually has given up close to 200 yards per game on the ground. And that's again, exactly I know we're only talking about 2 games, but they're ranked 31st in the league right now. If you have Conner, start Conner. The question is, if you have Snell, what do you do?
Right. It's something, if they get up big, then you might see the 2-headed backfield. I would probably be sitting Snell. We can only go on what we saw last week. There's definitely some other backfields that have two viable starting running backs, and Kelly and Eckler, and I think Wilson and McKinnon this week, but I would not start Snell this week.
All right. Anybody else?
Kelly, you just mentioned him. Josh Kelly, my start of the week. Okay, besides maybe Robinson, who already played, who we know had a good game. Kelly has touched the ball over 25 times last week. I mean, I'll take that any day for any running back. They go against Carolina, who's got a terrible run defense. They're going to be trying to control that game. Carolina doesn't have CMC. I mean, it all plays into Kelly having a really good game this week. I think it goes for about 110 and at least 1 score.
All right. Sounds good. Guy, and you mentioned McKinnon.
I was just going to say that, yep.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's talk about McKinnon for a second.
Well, I love McKinnon. He's such a talent. His knock was, even in Minnesota, playing behind Lat Murray, he was always such a talent. We're hearing is that he's probably going to get 10 to 12 carries, where Jeff Wilson's might be that more between the tackles guy. But against this Giants team, which offensively does not look very good and defensively is also giving up some rushing yards, I see Jerick McKinnon getting all-purpose scrimmage yards over 100 and a touch, and he's got a real possibility of breaking one, if not two long ones, because that's just what he does. So I love McKinnon this week, and I think this backfield also supports Jeff Wilson to get 12 to 15 carries and maybe some goal line runs.
I think you're probably going to think I'm crazy here. Well, you do normally, but to me, this is the Giants' game to win. San Francisco defensively has been decimated. Offensively, they've been decimated, and I think this is the Giants' chance to shine. I think Daniel Jones, Slayton, I think they're going to have a good game. I think San Francisco is going to be playing from behind. They obviously don't have Garoppolo, so if McKinnon is going to be the guy to get a lot of fantasy points, and by the way, I'm suggesting you start McKinnon as well. Don't get me wrong, but I think his points are going to come in a PPR league by passes out of the backfield, because I think San Francisco is going to be in catch-up mode. I don't think he's going to get more than 15 carries, but he's going to be getting a lot of catches out of the backfield.
I think Nick Mullins is. I hope that's the narrative, because most leagues that I know are half PPR or PPR. Of course, there are standard leagues out there, but I love if Nick Mullins, starting behind center, they get behind, they're going to do a lot of dump off passes to McKinnon and let him go do the work. I think Jordan Reed is a very sneaky play this week as well, because again, different backup quarterback. They love coming in. Their safety valves are generally the running backs and the tight ends. So I love McKinnon here for that reason too.
I'm a little worried about McKinnon this week, just because they're going to have a snap count on him, is what they're talking about. They're going to have Wilson. They have Mullins. They don't. I mean, their receivers are pretty beat up. They got a backup quarterback. Their defense is beat up. So the Giants can be controlling the ball. They might not have as many opportunities, and those opportunities may be split between McKinnon and Wilson. So, I mean, if he breaks one, that's what you're looking for this week with McKinnon, is him to break one. If he doesn't, I don't see him having a great game.
All right, so we talked about Fournette. We talked about Fournette, McKinnon, Kelly. Those are the guys we think you should be starting. Obviously, again, if you have the Zekes, if you have your top running backs, you've got to start them. Give us a call if you have any questions on whether or not you should start. If you have a dilemma as far as who's on your starting lineup, who's on your bench, give us a call, 772-800-BUZZ, or go ahead and put a comment in Facebook Live or YouTube Live, and we will get right with you. We're going to move on to wide receiver. Guys, Deontay Johnson, against a porous Houston Texan defense. What do you think? Right now, his target shares are crazy. I think he's sixth in the league right now in target shares. He's got to be a starter, right?
Absolutely. It's a great matchup, and Big Ben just absolutely loves him, and he looks for him in the red zone too. And that's another wide receiving core where it's a 1A, 1B, and both of those guys are startable. You're obviously going to start Juju Smith-Schuster, and these guys are just interchangeable when it comes to fantasy numbers. So, yeah, I love Deontay this week as well, every week going forward, as a matter of fact.
All right, who else?
I was talking with you. Were talking about Deontay Johnson. I was talking with someone, and I haven't really seen a lot of Pittsburgh games, but I hear that every time that Big Ben is throwing a pass longer than about 10 yards, he's holding his arm where it was reconstructed. Now that could be worrisome. I mean, it looks like he's fine. He hasn't had big games. That concerns me a little bit, because if he goes out, we all know what happens, to that team. One of the other wide receivers I like this week is Gallup. I know he hasn't had a great couple games, and I know CeeDee Lamb is kind of taken over there as the number 2 in that slot. But going against Seattle's defensive backfield has been horrible. They're giving up passing all over. I think slip Gallup back in your lineup this week. He had a drop last week. There was a penalty, but I think he's set up to have a really good game this week against Seattle's backfield.
Okay, well, we have
Amari Cooper gets a lot of those looks there.
We have a question from Javi. They have Gallup, Sanders, Julio, and Judy. which let me just start off by apologizing for the fact that that's what you have. And Scott also asked about Julio. We mentioned him earlier. I would like to know what other wide receivers you have, but let's start with Javi with Gallup, Sanders, Julio, and Judy. Brad, you had mentioned Gallup, so you think he should start if it's one out of those four. Are you benching Julio for Gallup?
Well, I mean, Julio he's not
game time decision, right?
We know that he's going to be a game time decision this week. So yeah, I do. He only needs one out of these four. So I mean, I go with Gallup here. Sanders, you can't rely on yet. They keep talking about when's he going to fit in with Breeze. When is this going to happen? He dropped one last week. I go with Gallup here.
Okay, so what about you, Keith? Gallup, Sanders,
I'm going to disagree.
Julio,
I'm going to go with Judy, believe it or not. Driscoll really had a nice relationship with him, a nice chemistry. They have to throw the ball. I mean, he's going to go for at least 200 yards, 250. It's got to go to someone. And Judy was starting to look good early on anyway. I think there's too many mouths to feed in Dallas. Amari Cooper is getting a good portion of it. CeeDee Lamb starting to look good. Sanders, forget about Sanders. And Julio's just hurt. And his last week was abysmal, and he's just not right. So believe it or not, it's not the popular choice, but I think Judy's going to put up the catches, the yards, and I think he's going to get a score this week.
Okay, so Javi, we're not helping you because we're giving you three different answers. What I'm going to tell you is if Julio, and you'll know by 11:30 or 11 o'clock tomorrow morning whether or not he's active, I start Julio only because over Gallup, Sanders, and Judy, and I do like Gallup, by the way, but between Schultz now and Lamb and Cooper, it's everyone's sharing. And I understand you're going to say the same thing with Ridley and Gage, but quite frankly, if Julio is starting, go with Julio. If Julio's not starting, go with Gallup. And Scott just asked a question, the same thing about Julio, but he's got McLaurin, Godwin, and Ridley. Stick with those three. Stick with Ridley, stick with McLaurin, stick with Godwin.
Yeah, McLaurin's a great start this week.
For this week, go ahead. It's nice that you have the ability to bench Julio in this sense. Similar to what I'm doing, I am benching Julio in favor of Corey Davis. So that's our Julio questions here. Let me see. Okay. So, guys, we talked about Deontay Johnson. Is there another wide receiver? You said Gallup. Anybody else?
I like Robbie Anderson this week. If he's still available on waivers, which I can't believe he is because he's showing he is a legit wideout. He's getting the looks, he's getting the yards, and he's getting the scores. Robbie Anderson is the real deal. Teddy Bridgewater and him have a very good chemistry. I love him, and I also love Scary Terry in Washington. He's showing to develop a nice chemistry with Dwayne Haskins.
So Robbie Anderson is one of only two receivers in the NFL to do something the first 2 weeks. Do you know what that is?
I know.
No.
All right, it's to gain over 100 yards in each of the first two games.
What? That's never happened?
No, I'm saying this year.
The first two? Oh, this year. Okay.
This year.
Okay.
You're saying no other receiver has had over 100 yards?
There's one other one. There's one other receiver to have over 100 yards for the first 2 weeks. I don't know. I can't remember who it is, but I know Robbie Anderson is the other one.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's very interesting. So now you're stumping the buzz, and it's your own question. Okay, so guys,
you're stumping yourself.
I have a question. It's not really a trivia question, but it's going to lead into a tight end, a surprise tight end that I think you guys might be interested in hearing about. If I were to ask you which tight end ranks third among all tight ends for target share, who would you say it is?
Dallas Goedert.
Nope.
He might be first.
Nope. So I know you probably don't know who it is. People out there, you might think that possibly Waller, possibly Higbee, some of the maybe Hurst, maybe, it's actually Logan Thomas. Logan Thomas, who plays for the Washington football team, actually ranks third among all tight ends for target share. Now, he hasn't taken those targets and necessarily turned them into anything. He's not catching all of them. They're not for touchdowns. But this week, guys, he plays against a Cleveland defense that's allowed an NFL worst 18 receptions and 25 PPR points to tight ends. And the Browns have allowed a tight end to score in each game, including which would be 3 total touchdowns over the past 2 weeks. If you're looking for somebody interesting, if you're looking for a flyer, you don't have one of the top 5 tight ends, and Logan Thomas will probably be available. I think he's worth a start.
If you want one of the most interesting names as a tight end, go with Mo Cox.
Yeah, Keith loves Mo Cox, but we know that.
No, I think that's Mike. He loves Cox.
That's true. Are you being serious?
No, I'm not being serious. It was a joke.
Okay, good. All right, guys, what about let's talk about some guys who people might be starting that they should bench.
From a tight end standpoint, or just
No, from
all
any standpoint,
positions?
from any position. And I'll start with one. And we've talked about him when we did our Buzz, what was it, Boomer Buzz, and we talked about Todd Gurley. Now, Todd Gurley this week is playing against Chicago. And Gurley, unfortunately, he hasn't been doing great. He's only playing in a little more than half of Atlanta's offensive snaps. He only got 2 of 5 targets in week 1, wasn't targeted at all in the passing game against Dallas. So right now, against a solid Chicago defense, you got to bench Todd Gurley.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah, 100%.
Cannot agree with you
He's
more.
getting the He's getting the carries. He's getting over 20 carries a game, but he's just not doing anything with it, and that's certainly concerning.
Okay, go ahead, Keith.
I'm not in love with David Johnson this week either. Same
Me
guy.
neither. I'm with you on that.
Yeah, getting the carries. I mean, and it's funny. I just traded Todd Gurley in a league where I had Drew Brees, and I traded Gurley and Brees to get Aaron Rodgers and AJ Brown. I was pretty happy with that. That's how low I am on Gurley this week and for the rest of the year. But same thing, David Johnson getting the carries. A very, very good Pittsburgh front seven is what they're going to be saying. So I do not like David Johnson this week if you have better options.
Staying on that Houston front, I have Deshaun Watson as a potential sit this week.
You broke up. You have Deshaun Watson as what?
As a potential sit this week. If you have a stream or a second quarterback that has better value, be very careful with him. Again, same reason he's going against the Steelers. Very good Steelers defense and a Steelers team that I think is going to be able to control the ball. A good portion of this game.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you have to have somebody else. Most likely, he was probably picked as the third or fourth quarterback picked in your league. But you're right. There are times when if you have somebody better, you have to bench them. And speaking of quarterbacks, we have another question. Are we going with Cam Newton or are we going with Dak Prescott? Initial thought is that Cam Newton is playing against Vegas. Vegas has a terrible pass defense. They've got a mediocre run defense. But Prescott is actually playing against Seattle.
It's a better matchup even.
Has given up an average of over 400 yards per game in the air. So they're actually worse than Vegas when it comes to pass defense. And their offense is ridiculously insane, which means it's going to be a shootout between Seattle and Dallas. And we saw last week, Dak Prescott had over 450 yards passing against a defense that gives up over 400 yards a game. You got to go with Dak Prescott over Cam Newton. What do you guys think?
Absolutely.
This Dallas Seattle game is being pumped up as like the game of the week. It's going to be
it could be. It is
points scored. You know what's going to happen? It's going to be like 6-3 at halftime.
Yeah, I know.
Somehow
then they'll blow up. Yeah.
Between the Cowboys and Seahawks game and the Chiefs Ravens game on Monday night, I'm really looking forward to this week.
Yeah, some really good football this weekend. Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be take the over if you're doing any fun prop bets as well this week. I think Dak's going to light it up this week. He's just looking very good.
Yeah, I mean,
way too many weapons.
As far as those two quarterbacks, it just seems that the numbers add up to go with Prescott. You know, the if it wasn't between those two quarterbacks and like you had I really like Cam Newton this week. Against Las
I like
Vegas.
Cam Newton too. If you didn't have both Newton and Prescott, I think Cam Newton's going to have a good week. Don't get me wrong.
But interestingly, it was Prescott that had 3 rushing touchdowns last week, by the way, to go along with some passing TDs as well. So, yeah, I'm loving Prescott.
All right. So, guys, do you have anything else, either in the stardom, the sit-em, the injuries, anything else before we finish today?
You're not going to sit him. I just don't know that you're going to get the production you're going to think this week. And I know because Phil Lindsay is out, everyone, they're going to be leaning on Gordon this week. But I think they're going to be able to stack the box against him. So as much as everybody who has him is going to start him, if I had him, I would start him. It's not a question there. It's a matter of, I don't know that you're going to get what you think with a backup quarterback, with the injuries, with everything else there. You may not get the value that you think you're going to get out of Gordon this week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Some other little things. If somehow Mike Gesicki is still on your waiver wire, you need to run and grab him. Not only did he get a score again this week, but he was targeted in the red zone a few times, and he was held. And if Fitzpatrick put that ball a little more on the money, he's getting a lot of red zone targets. Fitzmagic is moving the ball well. He loves Gesicki. He's getting the grabs, the yards, and the scores. So if he's somehow available, don't waste any time and grab him.
I have a question for you guys, and I know that it's kind of taboo to talk about kickers, but we have to realize that kickers, a good kicker is going to get you over 10 points a game, which, that's a touchdown and 40 yards. It's not necessarily something you should just forget about or gloss over. And one of the guys I want to ask you about is Daniel Carlson with the Raiders. Daniel Carlson, 2 weeks in a row, has had 12 fantasy points. Both of them come from a field goal of less than 40 yards and a field goal of more than 50 yards, and 4 extra points in each of those games. Is he for real? Is Daniel Carlson somebody that you would be willing to pick up? Most likely he's available in 90% of the leagues right now. But he's sitting out there, is Daniel Carlson, or do you think you need to wait and see what else he can do?
Honestly, with kickers, it's all about, for me, 80 to 90% of the decision is about the offense. You want an offense, it's interesting to think about it. That's good enough to drive the ball, to get you into scoring range, but just off enough to not score the touchdown, because obviously it's all about the field goals. Four touchdowns gets you 4 points as a kicker. So my answer is yes, because Vegas is doing a really nice job of moving the ball. I don't like the 4 touchdowns. I like teams that are going to stall out in the red zone and get 4 or 5 field goal attempts throughout the week. That's where the money really is.
And and you've just now explained you just now described the Indianapolis Colts.
Exactly.
Rodrigo Blankenship, he was from Georgia. Everybody knows he's the kicker with the glasses, and he was drafted. He was picked up by the Colts. And in week 1, he made 2 of 3 field goals. In week 2, he made 3 of 3 field goals. I'm sorry, he actually made 4 of 4 field goals in week 2. And that's against the bad Minnesota defense. So, and they play against the Jets this week. So I think Rodrigo Blankenship, if you want to grab a kicker, either Carlson or Blankenship might be a nice stream for you guys.
Yeah,
that's all I'm going to talk about kickers. I know. I'm sorry. Okay, we won't go into it. If it was up to me, kickers wouldn't even be part of fantasy, but they are, and so we have to deal with them. All right, so I guess we'll end on that note. Now that I've completely destroyed our viewership,
we're really ending on kickers. Seriously,
I apologize for that. We will, guys. We're going to be back Tuesday night. We're going to kind of go over what happened in week 3. We'll talk about your waiver wire, who should be picked up, who might be sitting out there, and answer your questions about whether or not there's certain players that you should drop or certain players you should pick up, and we'll give a preview of Week 4. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed your breakfast with the Buzz this morning. Keith, Brad, anything else to say before we leave?
So yeah, I appreciate it. We'll see everybody Tuesday night. And what do you think? And the under/over is on running back injuries this week.
Starting running back injuries. Starting running back injuries.
Over
Starting
under
running back.
2.
2. I was going to go with 3, but okay, 2.
Okay, hold on. 2 and 3. How many of those are out for the year versus possibly weekly sidelines?
Let's say minimum 3, 2 to 3 weeks. It is morbid. I know, it's just kind of fits along with this season, and we don't like it, but it's part of fantasy football. For me, it's part of the fun of fantasy football, not the guys getting injured, but having to stream guys and trade and do all those things that make fantasy football more fun.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going with under. I'm an optimistic guy sometimes.
I think we're going to have at least one out for the year, though. I see another 20. I hate to say it, but it's 2020. It's freaking 2020.
Yeah,
I'm still happy we're playing football, thank God.
It's not because it's 2020. Well, it is, but it's because of no preseason. It's because of limited practice. It's because of distractions. But yeah,
because 2020 this year is a dick. Let's just face it. This year is just a dick.
All right, guys. We will see you all Tuesday night. You can still go to our website, go to Facebook. Our group is Fantasy Football Buzz. Look us up, join us, ask any questions. We will address them on Tuesday night. Hope everyone has a great rest of the weekend, and go Gators.
That's right. Good luck with your teams.